Hello and welcome everyone. I'm Patricia Kingston. I'm the Corporate Events Officer at TourismNI, and thank you so much for joining us for today's Lunch and Learn webinar session. We're delighted today to be joined by a number of speakers, including both TourismNI and industry guests. So I'll just start by giving a quick overview of our running order for you all for our Inclusive and Accessible Tourism Lunch and Learn. So first up, we're going to be hearing from Margaret Matthews from TourismNI's Quality and Standards team, who's going to be taking us through key findings from some recent research which was carried out with the NI industry. Margaret's also going to be taking a look at our new Inclusive and Accessible Tourism Toolkit and how you can make use of that really useful tool within your own business. We're then going to be joined by an industry representative. So Mark Grimley, the Education Officer and Accessibility Champion at Armagh Planetarium, is very kindly given his time today to share some insights on what they're doing in their business with regards to inclusivity and accessibility measures. So following that, my industry development colleague Hilary Gibson is going to give us a quick introduction to our MyTourismNI e-learning platform. Some of you might have been on the lunch and learn we had all about that platform. So Hilary's going to introduce us to that once again before handing over to Ronan Cullen from Whole School, who will give us a bit of a tour and overview of some of the bespoke, inclusive and accessible tourism modules that are now available on that platform. Following that, as always, we'll have a live Q&A session. So then at that stage, we'll aim to cover any questions you might have for any of our speakers today. If you have any questions at all during today's session, pop them into the question box at any time during the presentations and we'll pick up as many of those as we possibly can at the end. So we're squeezing quite a lot into today's Lunch and Learn over the next 45 minutes or so. So let's get started. At this stage, it's my absolute pleasure to welcome and introduce Margaret Matthews, who's going to kick us off today. Good afternoon, Margaret, and over to you.
Thanks, Patricia. My name is Margaret Matthews from TourismNI. Delighted you've joined us today for this really important webinar on inclusive and accessible tourism. I will start with providing you with some stats around accessibility. So in Northern Ireland, around 1 in 5 people say that they have additional needs. In ROI, around 1 in 10 people have additional needs or travel with someone who has additional needs. Both of these specify that these are around mobility disabilities. 2/3 of people with disabilities or who travel with someone who has a disability say they look for accessible information before they visit the venue. Unfortunately, 30% do not find the information they require to make an informed decision on whether that venue is accessible to them. I think it's important to highlight at this stage the purple pine. The purple pine represents the spending power of disabled people, and its current worth is estimated at being £274 billion of the UK business economy per year. That's a huge market that you're potentially missing out on. So with this in mind, TourismNI felt that it was important to find out industry understanding around inclusivity and accessibility in order to establish what support was required. Therefore, we carried out a survey with the Northern Ireland tourism sector. The survey was designed with Disability Action to ensure we were asking the right questions. So 451 tourism businesses participated in the survey. So that ranged from accommodation providers, attractions, experiences, food and drinks venue. So I'll share some of those key findings with you now. So 45% of those surveyed viewed their business as not being accessible. I think it's important to highlight here the term fully accessible. Fully accessible is just not possible to achieve. People with the same disability can have very different access requirements, and there are also people with multiple disabilities. So our advice to you would be do not use the term fully accessible on your promotional information. Instead, use accessible. So 69% of those surveyed viewed it important that a business was accessible, which is really encouraging. Only 46 of those surveyed viewed their knowledge of inclusive and accessible tourism as being good or excellent. 65% advised that they had trained staff in disability, and equality training. Disappointingly, only 36 of those surveyed advise that they promote their accessible features. How is a potential customer to know if your venue will be accessible to them if you do not promote your accessible features? Think about the purple point here. On a more positive note, 62% agreed that with the right support, there are significant opportunities to improve in accessibility. We asked what support would encourage improving access. So not surprisingly, 50% said financial support, but 44% said that guidance on what could be or should be done would really help. So with the survey results in mind, TourismNI set about creating an accessibility plan to support the industry. Based on the survey findings, we established that industry needed practical information and advice, help on how to take action, and guidance on how to communicate their accessible features to their customers with disabilities. So we partnered with Visit Britain and purchased the license to use Visit Britain's Inclusive and Accessibility Toolkit. This toolkit was developed with a range of disability organisations representing a range of disabilities. TourismNI also engaged the services of Tilting the Lens to develop a Northern Ireland version of this toolkit. So the toolkit is free to download on the TourismNI website. There are 8 helpful sections within the toolkit. You can see those on your screen. Each provide practical guidance, quick win, non-costly tips and hints, technical advice in terms of design, lists of organisations that can assist you with your accessibility journey. For example, a list of access orders, providers of aids and equipment, and providers of training. So there are really helpful checklists as well in the toolkit, which you can download and self-assess your business, which will highlight the accessible features, which then you can use to promote these. So throughout the toolkit, there are inspirational case studies from a range of tourism providers in Northern Ireland, providing examples of best practice. So for example, Marble Arch Caves provide a virtual reality tour for those people who may not be able to access the caves. Game of Thrones Studio Tour provide a detailed access guide on their website, which is free to download. It lists all the accessible features and services so that potential visitors can make an informed decision on whether the tour will suit their needs. Also, Crumlin Road Jail provide free BSL video guides of the tour to assist customers who are deaf. So delighted to say we have Armagh Planetarium and Grand Central Hotel joining us today to talk about their accessibility journey. So a lot of good work is happening across Northern Ireland. So this toolkit will help you to develop yours. So I have a recent good news story to share with you. TourismNI supported an innovative tour guiding course for the deaf community, which will help ensure deaf visitors to Northern Ireland have an inclusive experience. Working in partnership with Belfast Met, Northwest Regional College, Derry and Strabane City Council, Foyle Deaf Association, we have delivered the first in its kind course in Northern Ireland. The Belfast cohort was delivered last year with 8 participants graduating, and the Derry Londonderry cohort has literally just finished with 6 participants graduating tomorrow. So that's all from me for now. You can find the toolkit and checklists on the TourismNI website, and we will share these with you after the webinar. Really happy to take any questions you may have after today's webinar, and I'll hand you back over to Patricia to introduce the next speakers. Thank you.
Just a reminder, of course, if you have any questions for Margaret or any of our upcoming speakers today, please don't forget to pop those into the question box at any stage during the webinar. And it's now my absolute pleasure to hand over to, Margaret mentioned one of our industry representatives today. So I'm going to hand over to Mark Grimley, who's the Education Officer and Accessibility Champion at Armagh Planetarium. Thank you so much for joining us today, Mark. So I can't wait to hear what you have to tell us in relation to what you guys have been doing there. maybe some inclusive and accessibility measures, and maybe even any challenges that you've found along the way. We're interested to hear it all, if that's okay. I'll
Yeah.
hand over to you, Mark. Thank you.
So thank you for having me here today. So it's a pleasure to be able to speak about the accessibility features that we're trying to add in. So on the list that you saw already, Century maps were included in that list for ourselves, and that started about 3 years ago, whenever I was working with a program called Bold Futures with the Association for Science and Discovery Centres. So for that particular project, it wasn't only the sensory maps that came out of it, but we worked with families who all had kids or members of the families who were on the autism spectrum. So we were able to get their direct feedback as to what works for them. So while we knew that this was a smaller sample size, we knew that this would also benefit us to help guide us along the right path, and we could amend things as we needed. So we got the sensory maps put together with the help of the group, as well as sensory packs for those who come in as well, because having these guys in really helped us avoid guessing or just Googling things and hoping for the best. Whereas we got direct feedback from not only this, but as well as that, our centre. So for everything from our dome theatre to our shows to the workshops that we do and even our exhibition area, we could see little tweaks we could make here and there to make it a little bit more comfortable for these kids and hopefully for more people. But one thing that came out of it was that one of the parents had said to us, you can't make everything perfectly accessible for everybody. What is good for one person might not work for the next kids. So along with that, we have worked on a few other projects. We had Explore Your Universe, which looked at putting together a model with ASDC again. They were looking at how people view science centres, and these all went in together. More recently, we also had training from AutismNI. So this helped us gain a greater understanding of what autism is. And then after that, we went into the Autism Impact Award with AutismNI. This was a 3-month or 12-week process to then make ourselves even more accessible. So we're aiming to become as accessible as possible by making little tweaks as we go along, as well as in the future, trying to make ourselves as effective as possible with this. It included tweaking a little bit our sensory maps, our bags, adding in more ear defenders in more places, and having a look at what we can do now to make things better. So it helped us take a better, closer look at what we do and how we do things to try and make things as easy as possible for people to come in and enjoy the place. In fact, it was after this that we started having our accessible Sundays. We had one a couple of months ago, and we have our second one happening this weekend, where we're going to be introducing another interpreted show. So we have some shows that are interpreted into ISL, BSL, Makaton, and now into LAV, the Irish version of that. So that will be premiered this weekend on Sunday morning. So we're looking forward to having that happen. The last one was quite successful for us, where we saw lots of people coming in and experiencing the place for the first time. We've also worked with some other groups to come in on days that we would normally be closed, where it becomes more accessible just for these groups, like the Memory Foundation, who came in as well and brought a lot of people who might not otherwise have come in to visit us. Just check to see if we have anything else I needed to throw in here. So we do try to get feedback from as many people as possible, from our visitors, with the public and with schools, because we do have quite a few schools that come in that are either special educational schools or have SEN units within mainstream schools. So we try to work with these schools and groups to get feedback in. That's the bit that really helps us change and make the tweaks as we go along to make sure that we're not losing some people along the way. So I think that's the main bulk of what we've done. Make the little changes here and there and add in what we can, where we can along the way, so that it really, really does help more people gain access by feeling comfortable first. So that's the first step that we've wanted to do. Make the place more comfortable and then make it more accessible from that kind of platform. So if anyone does have any questions, I will still be here at the very end, and feel free to throw any my way as well.
Thank you so much, Mark. That's brilliant. And actually, I think it's really interesting that so much of what you do, it's not all disabilities or additional needs are so visible, and so much of what you do is actually for those unseen things, but just making sure that everyone feels comfortable, everyone can have just the same, not it's not an identical experience, but they have the experience that suits best what their needs might be. So that sounds absolutely fab. And also, it's not all things that cost a fortune to do. Obviously, there's cost to some of those, but there's elements and some things that you put in place that
Yeah.
That you have to do everything. But as you say, it's evolving. It's not always you can't really be fully accessible. Everybody has such different needs, but there are some little steps that you could take without a big monetary investment as well. So that's really great. Thank you. That's been so helpful.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mark. I'll invite you back at the end in case anybody does have any questions, and I'll just remind you once again, do pop any questions that you have into the questions box in your control panel at any stage. So we had hoped to hear from Grand Central today, as Margaret mentioned there, but unfortunately they haven't been able to make it. But yes, that was absolutely super there from Armagh Planetarium. So thank you so much to Mark. I'm now going to hand over to my colleague, Hilary Gibson, who is in the industry development team with me. So Hilary's going to give us a very quick intro on the MyTourismNI e-learning platform before we get stuck into a bit of a tour of the new inclusive and accessible tourism modules that are available on that platform. So good afternoon, Hilary. I'm going to hand now over to you.
Thank you, Patricia. Hello, everyone. I'll not keep you too long. Just to let you know that I've been part of the wider TNI team tasked with developing this fantastic dedicated NI inclusive and accessible tourism toolkit, and then taking the content of that toolkit and transforming it into e-learning modules on our e-learning MyTourismNI. Very briefly, the e-learning platform was launched in February of last year and came about due to recognised industry need for always-on e-learning at a time and pace to suit individual industry needs and busy schedules. To date, the platform consists of 7 themed pillars covering topics such as people, digital, sustainability, sales and marketing, operational effectiveness, embrace giant spirit, and now a dedicated inclusive tourism pillar. Generally on the platform, there are 33 live courses with in excess of 150 modules to choose from across these 7 learning pillars. But specifically in relation to the inclusive and accessible tourism pillar, we have already, I think it's about 150 industry enrolled for the inclusive and accessible courses on the e-learning platform. And I'm hoping that after this webinar today, those numbers will be further boosted. So I'll hand over now to Ronan, and Ronan is from Whole School, who is our partner in developing the e-learning platform. And he'll show you specifically the toolkit coming to life in these e-learning modules, and you'll see how easy then it is to sign up and start your tourism inclusive and accessible learning journey. So over to you, Ronan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hilary. As Patricia mentioned at the start there, my name is Ronan Cullen. I'm from Whole School Software. We specialise in e-learning development, and specifically in this case, MyTourismNI, which Hilary mentioned was launched last February. We have a suite of courses on there, but I'm here specifically today to talk around the inclusive and accessible modules that we have onboarded in the past number of months. So this is MyTourismNI. For those of you who haven't seen it, you can access this by logging into TourismNI and simply going to the top right menu and clicking e-learning platform. So this is the home page, and as was mentioned at the start, there are 7 pillars with obviously a latest courses area as well. So today we're obviously talking about inclusive tourism, so I'm going to focus on this section. So as you access the page, there's a bit of information here just to tell you about what it is that we're trying to do with regards to the e-learning platform and specifically around inclusive and accessible tourism. We have 2 main courses online at the moment with a view to sort of grow that over the next number of months. Inclusive tourism communication, which is the one I'll just quickly show at the start, and then the toolkit, which has already been mentioned and walked through by Margaret very thoroughly at the start there. So the inclusive tourism communication modules consist of 6 modules. They are very specific around communicating confidently with people who are deaf, people who are partially sighted, people who have autism, learned disabilities in general, mobility issues, and then non-visible disabilities as well. So I'm just going to quickly jump in and show the style of these modules very briefly, and then I'll move onto the toolkit. So as you come onto these learning pages, what you have access to is a bit about the module and then what it's designed to teach you. So it's a very succinct modules. Some of them are between 5 and 10 minutes long. This one specifically is 6 minutes and 8 seconds.
Embrace the inclusive spirit. Module 6 of 6, how to communicate confidently with people who have a non-visible disability. Welcome to the Embrace the Inclusive Spirit Confident Communication course. This module explores how to communicate confidently with people who have a non-visible disability. It is presented in 2 short sections that cover 1. About non-visible disability, and 2. Communicating confidently with people who have a non-visible disability.
So that's just a bit of a snippet there of the introduction to this module. After each module within this course, you'll be asked to then take a quiz, which is designed to test your knowledge on the topics that were raised within the video itself. So there's 3 questions, very simple. Yeah, you know, it's 1 of 4. You pick one and then you finish your attempt. If you get 2 right, you're able to proceed to the next module, and so on and so forth. And then once you complete that, you get your Inclusive Tourism Communication badge, which can be shared across socials, etc. So if I just jump back into the Inclusive Tourism page, and then we'll have a look now at the Inclusive and Accessible Tourism Toolkit. This was developed in conjunction with Tilting the Lens and the industry experience team as well. Hilary and the wider team were very, heavily involved in how this would look and feel. And it does consist of the same sort of 8 topics that were covered in the original toolkit. For those of you who haven't seen the toolkit yet, it looks like this. You can access it on tourismni.com, and it is very, very thorough. And I would encourage everyone to go and download it, have a read through. It may be that you have a read at a section per lunchtime or something like that, just in your downtime. But having been through it all end to end, I can say it's very, very comprehensive. And there's some really, really solid information in here about how you can make your own tourism business more accessible and just reach those people within the sector that maybe need that little bit more support than your standard customer. So if I jump back in and have a look at this course, as you see when you scroll down, you have an introduction and then you start the modules. So what is accessibility? The benefits of providing an inclusive experience, knowing your customer, an inclusive welcome, accessible features and facilities, marketing your accessibility, inclusive recruitment and employment, and continuing your accessibility journey, which we heard there initially, is, accessibility isn't a goal you achieve and you are fully accessible. It's an ever evolving part of your business that should be reviewed regularly. At the bottom then we have top 20 tips. Now these go from self-catering venues, hotels, visitor attractions, and food and beverage businesses. So there's some really solid information in there as well, just really easy to consume as well. So I would advise everyone just to jump in and have a look at those. Then we have some checklists at the bottom, again, that follow the similar vein of visitor attractions, service accommodation, food and beverage businesses. And we also have some things around events venues there, which is obviously very crucial for the amount of events that we host in Northern Ireland, especially over the summer. We have then key feature questionnaires, which are designed to help you reflect on your current practices and sort of expose some gaps maybe where you could be doing some more things to providing that more inclusive and accessible experience all around. We have some employer resources in there, and we have also some accessibility personas. So really, really rich information to be consumed in here. But I'm going to jump in quickly and show one of the modules of this and see how it's sort of formed. So we jump in and we are given the option to go either with no sign language, BSL or ISL. So that's British Sign Language and Irish Sign Language. And for the sake of this demonstration, I'm going to go with BSL.
In this module, we will focus on understanding the needs of different customer groups, and the toolkit has multiple resources to help you with this. Firstly, it is important that your focus is on understanding where there are potential barriers to accessibility.
So each module opens up with Orla McCann from Tilting the Lens, just delivering in plain English what the module is designed to teach you, and goes into some of the more salient points that are available in the preceding modules. So if I just continue this lesson, I'll then be given some information around knowing your customers, understanding your customers' requirements, and so on and so forth. So you just go through. We call it a bouncing ball. So you just follow the bouncing ball, and there's some really solid information in here as well. At the end of the module, once you've consumed all this content, again, this is always on learning, so you can jump in, you can go through bits and pieces at a time. You don't have to go through all these modules in one setting. So I'm just going to go through very quickly and get to the end of module 3. And at the end of module 3, I'll be asked to do an exercise. So this is asking me to reflect on the course concept, on the content, and identify a concept, fact, or practice that has resonated with you or taught you something new. There's additional actions in here, considering how the insight could be applied to your workspace or shared with others to promote collaboration and growth. So this is basically designed to make you reflect on your own business practices and using the information you've learned in the previous videos and pages to then come up with sort of a plan on how you can apply that to your own business. It may be a sentence, it may be a paragraph, it may be a lot more than that, depending on what type of business you are in. So at the end of this, you will then be able to download your toolkit responses across the board. So you'll see here I have completed this and I have filled in sort of a fair amount of information in each area, and I'm going to use this then going forward as my action plan for improvement to become more accessible and inclusive in all of my tourism business practices. So you get to take that away with you at any point in time, and in order to access that, back to the page, you would be going here. So you print view, and then you can download that as a PDF. Again, this is always live, so if you go in and you update the response areas, that reflects directly in your PDF. So you can do 1 or 2 modules at a time, download that PDF so you have them, and then continue on and just continuing to reissue the PDF download, which then serves as the action plan for the business. Again, there's a bit of information about each module and about the course in general. So that's essentially the lap around the Inclusive and Accessible Tourism Toolkit. There are other courses as well that I will just quickly jump in and show you. We're about to launch a new Introduction to AI and Tourism course, and within this we have a specific module for accessible and inclusive tourism and how AI can impact those strands of your business, things like personalized recommendation and implementation, and AI in general for inclusive tourism. So I'll just quickly show what this looks like.
In this video, we are exploring AI for accessible and inclusive tourism, powerful tools that can help your business welcome and serve all visitors regardless of their abilities or needs.
So I would advise everyone just to keep an eye out. This is going to be going live in the next week or 2, and there is a lot more information in here in general around AI, so things like compliance and best practices. But specifically for today, I just wanted to highlight that Module 2 is a great resource for leveraging AI and reviewing your business practices going forward. So that's my demo done for today. I'll be here at the end for any questions, and I'll pass you back over to Patricia. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ronan. That was really, really useful. And I suppose the other thing, there's an awful lot in there, and that I think you probably touched on this in the inclusive and accessible modules. So if there's a particular area that you're interested in, there's no reason why you don't have to start at number 1 and work your way logically through every single section. If there's a particular area and you want to jump in at whatever section 7 is, for example, there's no reason not to, and you can really focus in on, you know, a lot of our industry are small businesses, and you don't have a lot of time, and it might be a bit daunting. There's so much in there, but absolutely can. I hope I'm right in saying, Ronan, you can just dip into, you know, start at the bit that's most relevant or most kind of urgent, or the thing that you'd most likely to focus on first, and make your little action plan for that section. Would that be right?
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, I would advise everyone just to do the introduction to the toolkit in
Of
general.
course.
Just it gives you a really good overview of how it's supposed to work and how you're meant to engage with it. But yeah, as you say, Patricia, you can jump in at any module you like that's sort of very pertinent at that point in time. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Because I think it's that thing we keep on saying. It's um, don't wait until you think you can do everything to start. Go ahead and start, and get on the journey. So thank you so much, Ronan, and I'll invite you back at the end if for some questions as well. So just a reminder, everyone at this stage also, we will be sharing a recording of today's session and a PDF of the slides so you can review those again at your leisure. As I've mentioned, I'll shortly be kicking off our Q&A session. So if you have any questions you haven't popped into the question box just yet, there's still a little bit of time to do that, and we'll try and pick up any that we can today. Just before we get stuck into our questions, as always with our webinars, we're going to do a couple of very quick polls just to get a feel for how useful you found today's session so far. So firstly, it should pop up on the screen shortly. How beneficial did you find today's session? So that's on a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being very beneficial. Okay, I'll just give everyone a little moment to complete that one. Fab, thank you. And we'll move on now to the next question, which is how would you rate today's session in terms of content and relevance to your business? So again, on a scale of 1 to 5. Just give everyone a wee moment to make your selection. Thank you. And our final question is just a very simple yes or no. Do you plan to take any action within your business or organisation as a result of what you've heard so far from our speakers today? Thank you so much for taking the time to do that. And as always, just a reminder that you will receive a link to a short evaluation form following this session. So that is your chance to let us know how you find today's session, of course, but not just how useful you find today's session. Also, there'll be an opportunity there to let us know what else you might like to see from the Tourism Enterprise Development Programme or any TourismNI industry events going forward. So appreciate if you could take the time to share your thoughts on that if you get a moment once that pops into your inbox. Okay, so now I'd like to welcome back all of our speakers and we can get stuck into just a couple of questions. Excuse me, sorry. So from TourismNI, we've got Quality and Standards Advisor Margaret Matthews and Industry Development Officer Hilary Gibson. From Whole School, Ronan, who we just heard from, Ronan Cullen, who look after our MyTourismNI e-learning platform, and also Mark Grimley, who kindly joined us today from Armagh Planetarium. Mark, if you're still there, fabulous. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for all those really useful insights today. Thanks for sticking around. So Margaret, I think you're going to be a little bit in the hot seat here, but if anyone wants to jump in with any additional comments as we go, just based on the couple of questions we have here, but I'll come to you first, Margaret. Someone was wondering, this is from sort of an activity provider, I guess, perspective, activity and adventure. Would you be able to provide information or examples of practical solutions for challenges presented by people operating outside in the natural environment or maybe using equipment? So from an activity perspective, is there any advice that you can give in relation to that?
Well, actually, within the toolkit, there are really good design guides. They're listed on, I think, 131 to 133. These design guides will lead you through practical advice for improvements to the natural environment. I would also recommend creating an access plan, and the checklists that are in the toolkit will really help you to do that. So that in terms of the natural environment, that would be, for example, the widths of a path, the surface of a path, the gradients of pathways, external signage, lighting, etc. But it's all detailed within those references within the toolkit. I would also refer to some of the case studies within the toolkit as well. So, for example, Belfast Zoo, there's the Giant's Causeway as well. There's suppliers of aids and equipment out there as well. For example, the May Murray Foundation, they provide equipment which can help people with various different types of disabilities access beach environments. So again, a list of suppliers are listed on our toolkit as well.
That's super, Margaret. Thank you so much. I think this one may be for yourself as well. And we always get a question in relation to funding, because things do cost money. But someone was wondering in particular if there was any support or funding, or resources available for embedding accessibility right from the very start within a new business. So is there any guidance at all you could share there?
In terms of specific funding for that, I am not aware that there is any available, unfortunately. But I would advise everyone here to make contact with their local council. You can search for business support and grants, and sometimes councils will make funding available at different times for different types of projects. So I think that would be a good point to contact. Also, DERA as well on occasions do offer grant aid, but again, they have their own criteria available. In terms of embedding access into the design of your project, that's where your architect will come into play, and building regulations in terms of Part R building regulations. So when you're starting your journey, make sure you discuss your access requirements and the importance of it with your architect.
That's great. And as you mentioned earlier, Margaret, we had hoped to be joined by a hotel example today. Mark very kindly gave us some really useful insights from a sort of a visitor attraction perspective. I'm just wondering if there's any sort of advice from the accommodation side. Obviously, you also work in our quality and grading team. If there's any advice, or if you are an accommodation provider and you want specific tips, where should people head to?
Again, I think this applies to any tourism business. Definitely refer to our checklists and questionnaires within the toolkit. They will enable you to kind of self-assess your premises and your services. The questions are really straightforward. It'll lead you through your premises and services. And with this information, then you'll be able to establish, okay, I'm doing this okay, but maybe I need to work on this, so you can develop your sort of action plan of works in and around that. And a lot of this doesn't need to be expensive physical changes, for example, providing chairs within a queuing system, or providing larger print menus or information in larger print. So I think that's helpful to as a first point, is to assess your premises. You can also buy in the services of a professional access auditor to do that for you. But once you get that information, I think it's really, really key that you promote this information. You heard in my presentation earlier, only 30% of businesses promote their accessible features. And people need to know this information before they can visit your venue, so you're missing out there. So definitely, again, have a look at some of the case studies. For example, Game of Thrones have a really good access plan, as do Armagh Planetarium on their website. And again, it's listing, how many accessible parking bays there are, the approach to the building, internal access, where the toilets are, any aids and equipment, provision of, BSL, that type of thing. So that information is all on their website, so people know before they go, right, that this premises will suit my needs. So I think that's really important. So yeah, definitely go through the checklists and questionnaires, complete those, and then get your information on your website.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. And unless there's anything else anyone else wants to add at this stage or jump in with, I'm just going to finish off by sharing a reminder of some useful links. So Margaret had touched on some of these. I think a little slide will just pop up on the screen here. So the Inclusive and Accessible Toolkit, this will be in the PDF of slides that we share afterwards. There's a handy link to that. The checklists that Margaret just mentioned there as well. There's a little a quick handy link to there. If you haven't used the e-learning platform before, there's a link there that will take you through to information on how to get started on the MyTourismNI e-learning platform. But if you're already signed up, you can head straight to mytourismni.com, log in, and head right away to the bespoke, inclusive and accessible tourism modules. And of course, there's lots of other modules on there. We were chatting just last week about the Get Open Ready Toolkit modules that are on there as well. So if anyone's still planning to get ready in the run up to the Open, and also other lots and lots of other modules and topics, and those AI ones coming soon, as Ronan kindly mentioned earlier as well. So Also, just a reminder, we did have, some of you may have joined us for it, we had an in-person Inclusive and Accessible Tourism event up in Derry Londonderry back in April, which feels like 2 years ago now. Now it was only a couple of months ago, but it was a really fab day, and it included a little bit more detailed look from Emer, our head of experience in industry development, on some of those stats and the survey results that Margaret touched on for us today. Also a really insightful industry panel discussion, and lots of other good things. So we actually have recordings now available from that whole day on our website. So they're on our YouTube, TourismNI YouTube channel. But also what we'll do is, when we send a little follow-up email to everyone that's registered for this session today, we'll include a link to that again today. You can find it by heading to tourismni.com/TED, and if you scroll down to our previous events and click in there, but we'll share a little link for ease as well with you guys for that. So all that really remains for me now is just to say thank you so much to all of our speakers today for joining us, Margaret, Mark, Hilary and Ronan. Thanks of course to the team at Eventful behind the scenes who've been keeping everything flowing for us. We've got Anne and Eden today, so thanks to those guys. And thanks to everybody that's joined us for the session today. Also, anybody who might be watching this recording afterwards, we really appreciate you taking the time to listen to us today, and hopefully see you again at something else in the near future. So thanks, and have a great rest of your day.